You're nothing but a burden. You'll never succeed at anything. Marcus's words hit like a slap across the kitchen table. I felt my cheeks burn as I stared at my plate. Mom's jaw tightened, but she kept cutting her food. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. Emma pushed peas around her plate in the awkward silence. Marcus, that's enough, Mom said tiredly, like she'd given up years ago. I wanted to disappear. That's when I noticed the old wooden box on the counter, Grandpa's belongings, untouched since his funeral 6 months ago. Something flickered in my memory. There was a sealed letter in that box with my name in Grandpa's shaky handwriting. I'd seen it briefly when we packed his things, but everyone was too upset to go through everything properly. My heart raced. What if that letter held something important? Grandpa had always believed in me when nobody else did. I couldn't sleep. Marcus's words echoed as I crept downstairs at midnight, bare feet silent on cold tiles. The house was dark except for the microwave's green glow. My hands trembled opening the wooden box. Inside were Grandpa's glasses, pocket watch, photographs, and at the bottom, the letter. Cream envelope with Sarah, in his careful script. The envelope felt thick, like more than just a letter inside. My fingers traced my name as tears pricked my eyes. Footsteps creaked upstairs. I quickly shoved the letter into my hoodie pocket and closed the box. Marcus appeared in the doorway, hair messy from sleep. What are you doing down here? Couldn't sleep. Just getting water. He looked around suspiciously before heading back upstairs. I clutched the letter through my pocket, heart pounding. The next morning, I heard Marcus on the phone in the living room. Something in his tone made me freeze and listen. I know you said there wasn't a will, but are you sure you checked everywhere? If there's paperwork giving Sarah claim to anything. My stomach dropped. He was talking about Grandpa's estate. The lawyer said everything was straightforward. Grandpa died intestate, so his savings would split between our parents. I'm not trying to cheat anyone. I just think I should handle family, financial stuff. Sarah's not exactly responsible with money. That stung. I'd worked part-time since high school and never asked for money, unlike Marcus, who constantly borrowed from our parents. The letter in my pocket felt heavier. Maybe there was more to Grandpa's estate than anyone knew. I waited until everyone left before opening the letter. Sitting on my bed with the door locked, I carefully tore the envelope with shaking hands. Grandpa's familiar handwriting, shakier than I remembered but distinctly his. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you've doubted yourself again. Tears blurred my vision. How had he known I'd need this exact message? Sarah, my dear girl, you have always been the light in this family, even when they couldn't see it. You have a strength they don't understand because it's quiet, not loud like theirs. But quiet strength moves mountains. I wiped my eyes and continued reading. I know your brother struggles with money and will probably try to handle everything himself. He means well, but doesn't understand what matters. I've made sure my lawyer has specific instructions about my workshop. Workshop? What workshop? There's something that belongs to you, something I kept separate from the main estate. I could feel more in the envelope. I turned the envelope upside down. Something small and metal fell into my palm, a tarnished old key with a strange shape I didn't recognize. On the letter's back, in faint pencil, 1247, Maple Creek Road, Storage Unit 23. A storage unit made sense. Grandpa had downsized when he moved to the retirement home. Maybe he'd kept things in storage. The front door slammed. I shoved the letter and key into my backpack as Marcus's voice carried upstairs. Looking out my window, I saw him pacing in the backyard on his phone, body language tense and frustrated. I grabbed my laptop and looked up the address. A storage facility 20 minutes away, the kind where people kept furniture and belongings. If Grandpa had a storage unit separate from the official estate, maybe that's where his real treasures were hidden. But I'd need to be careful. If Marcus found out, he'd probably claim it was family property. During my lunch break from the library, I drove to the storage facility. Rows of metal units stretched behind chain-link fencing. In the small trailer office, a bored woman checked her computer when I explained I was Walter Whitman's granddaughter with a key. Unit 23. Paid through next year. Sweet old man. Sorry for your loss. She handed me a clipboard. Sign here. You'll need a death certificate to transfer the lease. This was real. Grandpa really had a secret storage unit. Unit 23 was in the back row. The key fit perfectly. When I rolled up the metal door, I gasped. Inside was a miniature workshop, workbench, tools organized on pegboards, furniture pieces in various restoration stages. A filing cabinet in the corner had a manila envelope taped to the top. My hands shook as I pulled off the envelope addressed to me in Grandpa's handwriting. Inside was a letter from Thomas Brennan, attorney at law, dated 3 months before Grandpa died. Dear Miss Whitman, per your grandfather's instructions, you are the sole beneficiary of his woodworking business assets, including all tools, completed projects, and contents of Storage Unit 23. A woodworking business? I kept reading. Mr. Whitman was specific that these assets should not be included in his general estate, as they represent his life's work and should go to someone who would appreciate and continue his craft. He spoke of you often and believed you had the patience and attention to detail for restoration work. This was completely separate from Grandpa's regular will covering personal belongings and savings. This was business property in his own name. A handwritten note from Grandpa. Sarah, I started refinishing furniture as a hobby, but it became something more. These tools are yours if you want them. The world needs people who can fix broken things. I spent an hour examining everything. The tools were high quality and well maintained. Several furniture pieces were in restoration stages: an antique rocking chair, dining table with carved legs, a desk needing refinishing. In the filing cabinet, receipts, project notes, even invoices. Grandpa had been selling his restoration work. Not huge amounts, but enough for storage fees and supplies. There was also a notebook filled with his handwriting, techniques, wood stain recipes, sandpaper notes. Like a manual of everything he'd learned. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Where are you? Mom's looking for you. I quickly locked up and drove home, mind spinning. I'd inherited something valuable and meaningful, completely separate from family drama over Grandpa's other belongings. But Marcus was already asking questions. If he found out about the workshop, he might claim it was family inheritance. When I got home, he was waiting with a strange expression. Where were you? The library said you left early. Running errands, I said casually. His eyes narrowed. What kind of errands? Personal stuff, I said truthfully. I wasn't ready to tell anyone about the storage unit. Marcus studied my face. You're acting weird, Sarah. First digging through Grandpa's stuff, now disappearing during the day. I'm not digging through anything, and I'm allowed to have a life outside this house. Well, I talked to the estate lawyer today. Mr. Peterson confirmed there's no will, so everything gets divided by state law. Mom and Dad get his savings, personal stuff gets split between us kids. My heart pounded, but I kept my expression neutral. Okay. I was thinking it might be easier if I handle sorting through his belongings. Take care of selling or donating stuff. Save everyone the emotional hassle. That's considerate, I said carefully, but I'd like to go through some things myself. For sentimental reasons. Marcus's jaw tightened.
Right.
Sentimental reasons. After he left, I looked up Thomas Brennan online. Real office, good reviews. Tomorrow I'd call and confirm my legal rights regarding the storage unit. I called Mr. Brennan from my locked bedroom. His secretary put me through immediately when I mentioned Grandpa's name. Miss Whitman, I've been expecting your call. Your grandfather spoke of you often. I'm sorry for your loss. I found your letter in the storage unit. I want to make sure I understand everything correctly. The woodworking business assets are completely separate from your grandfather's personal estate. He set it up specifically to avoid family complications. The storage unit lease, tools, inventory, it's all yours, free and clear. Relief flooded through me. So my family can't claim any of it. Not legally, no. Your grandfather was very careful about documentation. However, storage fees are current through next month, then you'll need to take over payments or make other arrangements. How much are the fees? $120 monthly. I did quick math. I made about $800 monthly at the library. The fees would strain my budget, but were manageable if I was careful. The bigger question was whether I actually wanted to continue Grandpa's business. That evening, I called my friend Jessica, who was studying business at community college. "This is amazing," she said after I explained everything. "Do you realize what an opportunity this is? I don't know anything about running a business. But you're careful and detail-oriented. You have his tools and notes to learn from. Plus, furniture restoration is really popular now. People love vintage and upcycled stuff." She had a point. I'd seen incredible before and after furniture transformations on social media. "Start small," Jessica suggested. "Keep your library job, spend weekends learning techniques. See if you enjoy it before committing to anything major." It was sensible and low risk. I could always sell the tools if it didn't work out. "Have you told your family?" "No, and I'm not sure I should. Marcus is already acting weird about Grandpa's estate. If he finds out I inherited the business, he might cause trouble. Keep it quiet for now, at least until you know what you want to do." Over the next 6 months, I spent every free moment at the storage unit, starting with Grandpa's notebook. His handwriting was comforting, like having him teach me personally. I began with the smallest project, refinishing the antique desk. Following his notes step by step, I stripped the old finish, sanded, and applied new stain. The work was meditative but frustrating. My first attempt looked terrible, streaky and uneven. I had to strip it and start over. The second try was better, but still amateurish. It took 3 attempts before I produced something decent. I took before and after photos, proud but realistic about my beginner level. My peaceful routine was interrupted when I came home to find Marcus going through the wooden box again. "What are you doing?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Mom asked me to sort through this stuff. We can't keep it on the counter forever." The original letter was safely hidden, but I didn't like Marcus pawing through everything. "Find anything interesting?" "Just old junk mostly. Although," he pulled out a photograph I'd never seen, Grandpa standing in front of what looked like a workshop. My blood ran cold. "Where do you think this was taken?" Marcus asked, studying the photo. I forced a casual shrug. "Maybe his apartment workshop before he moved." "Maybe." But Marcus looked skeptical. He flipped it over, and my heart stopped. "Sarah's inheritance. Where dreams become reality." What's that supposed to mean? "Probably just Grandpa being sentimental," I said dismissively while my pulse hammered. Marcus stared at the photo. "I've been thinking. Maybe there are things about Grandpa's estate we don't know. Mr. Peterson might have missed something." "Like what?" "Business assets, maybe. He was always tinkering with furniture. What if he had a workshop somewhere not included in estate paperwork?" I felt sick. That seems unlikely. The lawyer would have found anything like that. Would he, though? If Grandpa kept it separate somehow? Marcus was getting too close to the truth. I needed to deflect him. "Why are you so focused on this?" Grandpa wasn't secretly rich. He lived in a tiny apartment and drove a 15-year-old car. His face flushed. "I'm not being greedy. I just want everything handled properly." But something in his expression suggested there was more to his interest. That night, I overheard Marcus on the phone through thin walls. "No, I can't ask for another extension. I already said I'd have the money by month's end." My stomach dropped. He owed someone money. That explained his sudden interest in Grandpa's estate. "Look, I'm handling it, okay? There might be family assets that haven't been accounted for yet. I just need more time." Marcus wasn't just curious about the estate. He was counting on it to solve a financial problem. The next morning, I called Mr. Brennan again. "I'm wondering about legal protections around the storage unit. If someone in my family found out, could they challenge my ownership?" "The documentation is solid. Your grandfather was very specific about keeping this separate. However, if you're concerned about family drama, you might consider moving the contents to a more secure location." "What do you mean?" "If someone else knows about the storage unit, they might try to access it or cause problems. It might be worth finding a workshop space you can rent month to month, somewhere more private." The idea made sense, but would cost more money. Still, if Marcus was desperately looking for assets, the storage unit might not stay secret much longer. I started looking at workshop rental spaces. Most were too expensive, but I found a small garage behind an antique shop whose owner would rent cheaply in exchange for restoration work on his inventory. "You do good work on a few pieces," he said, examining photos of my finished desk, "and we can work out a deal that helps us both." Frank had been in the antique business 30 years. Your grandfather had a decent reputation among local collectors. Walter Whitman did solid work, though he was still learning when I knew him. If you put in the time, you might get there too. Frank showed me a couple pieces he'd bought from GrandPa, nicely restored, but not museum quality. He had good instincts, but furniture restoration is harder than people think. Takes years to really master. We agreed I could start moving tools the following week. The space was smaller than the storage unit, but had better lighting and electrical outlets. That evening, I planned how to move everything without Marcus noticing. But when I got home, he was waiting with a determined expression. "We need to talk." I hired a private investigator to look into Grandpa's assets. My blood turned to ice. "You did what?" "A PI who specializes in estate investigations. I want to make sure we're not missing anything that rightfully belongs to the family." "Marcus, that's crazy. And expensive." "Why would you?" "Because I think Grandpa had more than anyone realized, and I think you might know something about it." I tried to look confused rather than panicked. "What makes you think that?" "The way you've been acting. Secretive, disappearing at weird times. And that photo with your name on it. Grandpa was trying to tell us something. If he'd actually hired an investigator, they might find the storage unit soon." "Marcus, you're wasting your money. If there were secret assets, wouldn't a professional estate lawyer have found them?" "Not if they were hidden well enough. Not if someone was deliberately keeping them secret." His eyes bored into mine, looking for any sign I knew more than I was saying. "Look, if you want to spend money on a wild goose chase, that's your choice. But I don't know anything about hidden assets." It wasn't technically a lie. I didn't know about the storage unit when he first started asking questions. But it felt dishonest. "We'll see. The PI should have a report by next week." I was running out of time. If a professional investigator dug into Grandpa's finances, they'd eventually find the storage unit payments and trace them back. The next morning, I called in sick and frantically moved tools and furniture from the storage unit to Frank's garage. For trips in my small car, but I got everything moved before anyone could spot me. Frank helped set up the workshop space. "You seem nervous," he observed as I arranged tools for the third time. "Family drama. Some people think I shouldn't have inherited this stuff." He nodded knowingly. "Happens a lot when someone dies. People get greedy, start fighting over things that don't matter. I don't even know if I'm good enough to make this work. What if I'm wasting everyone's time?" Frank examined my refinished desk. "It's decent work for a beginner. You've got potential, but don't expect professional quality for a while. Most people take 2 or 3 years to get really competent." His honesty was both encouraging and sobering. When I got home, I returned the storage unit key and officially terminated the lease. Whatever happened next, the workshop was safely moved to a location Marcus didn't know about. But the next morning, he confronted me at breakfast with a printout. "Maple Creek Storage. Unit 23. Paid for by Walter Whitman for 3 years." My heart pounded, but I tried to look confused. "What's that?" "The PI found it in Grandpa's bank records. Monthly payments to a storage facility." Marcus's eyes were bright with triumph. "So, I drove over there yesterday." I kept my expression neutral. "And the unit's been cleared out. Terminated yesterday." He leaned forward. "The same day you called in sick." I felt trapped. No way to deny it now, without looking more suspicious. "Fine. I found out about the storage unit. But it's not what you think." "Really? Then what was in it?" I took a deep breath. Woodworking tools and furniture projects. Grandpa had been refinishing furniture as a hobby. He left it to me specifically. Marcus's face went red. "And you didn't think to mention this to the family?" "Because it's not part of the estate. It was kept separate legally." "I have documentation." "Let me see it." I got Mr. Brennan's letter from my room. Marcus read it twice, expression growing darker. This is bullshit. Grandpa can't just decide to keep assets separate from his estate. Actually, he can. You can call the lawyer yourself. Mom and Dad came into the kitchen during our argument, looking confused and concerned. What's going on? Mom asked. Marcus waved the letter. Sarah inherited a bunch of Grandpa's stuff and didn't tell anyone. She's been lying to us for weeks. I wasn't lying. I was figuring out what to do with it. Dad read the letter over Marcus's shoulder. This looks legitimate. Of course it's legitimate, Marcus snapped. But that doesn't make it right. This is exactly the kind of thing that tears families apart. How does me inheriting some old tools hurt anyone? I asked. Because it proves Grandpa played favorites. Because he obviously thought you were more deserving than the rest of us. The pain in his voice was real, and for a moment I felt sorry for him. But then I remembered all the times he'd called me worthless. Maybe he thought I'd actually use them instead of just selling them for quick cash. Marcus's face went white. What's that supposed to mean? Maybe he knew you're only interested in money. Maybe he wanted his tools to go to someone who'd actually care about the work. That's enough, Mom interrupted weakly. Dad was still studying the letter. Sarah, what are you planning to do with this workshop? I've been learning furniture restoration. I'm still pretty bad at it, but I'm getting better. I might try to make it a small business eventually. That's wonderful, honey, Mom said uncertainly. Grandpa would be proud. Marcus threw up his hands. Unbelievable. She hides a major inheritance from the family, and everyone thinks it's wonderful. It's not a major inheritance. It's some old tools and a few pieces of furniture. Then you won't mind if I see this workshop of yours, Marcus challenged. If it's really no big deal. I felt cornered, but refusing would make me look like I was hiding something else. Fine. But you're not touching anything. The next day, I reluctantly took Marcus to Frank's shop. I'd warned Frank my brother was coming and might be difficult. Marcus walked around the workshop with a critical eye, examining tools and furniture I'd been working on. I could see him calculating values. This is more than just some old tools. This stuff is worth thousands. Maybe, but it's not like I can just sell it and pocket the cash. These are working tools. The value is in using them. Frank appeared from the front. You must be Sarah's brother. I knew your grandfather. Decent craftsman. Marcus shook his hand politely, but didn't smile. Did you buy stuff from him regularly? A few pieces over the years. He was still developing his skills, but had good instincts. I could see Marcus's wheels turning. If Grandpa had been selling furniture, maybe this really was a business worth something. How much money could someone make doing this? Frank shrugged. Depends on skill level and how much you want to work. Most people starting out make maybe a few hundred a month for years. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme. Takes time to build skills and reputation. After we left, Marcus was quiet during the drive. Finally, he said, I owe some people money, Sarah. Gambling debts. I thought maybe if there were family assets. It was the first honest thing he'd said to me in months. How much do you owe? 15,000. His voice was quiet, ashamed. I felt sympathy and frustration. Marcus, even if I sold everything, it wouldn't cover that much. I know. I was desperate. Over the next few weeks, things remained tense at home. Marcus stopped asking about the workshop, but was clearly struggling with his debt. He'd gotten quiet and withdrawn, worse than his usual aggression. Mom pulled me aside one evening. I'm worried about your brother. He's been getting upsetting phone calls, and yesterday I saw him looking at payday loan websites. Those are terrible. The interest rates are insane. I know. Your father and I are thinking about helping him, but we can't afford $15,000. I spent that night thinking about Marcus's situation. Despite everything he'd put me through, I didn't want to see him destroyed by debt. If he got desperate enough for payday loans, he'd just dig himself deeper. The next morning, I called Frank. How quickly could I finish the pieces I'm working on? And what could they sell for realistically? Well, the dining table's almost done, but with your skill level, maybe 400. The rocking chair, another 300 if you're lucky. Why? I explained about Marcus's situation. Frank listened thoughtfully. I've been looking for someone to help with basic restoration work. Nothing fancy, just stripping and sanding mostly. Pays $10 an hour. Not great, but it's honest work. Could you offer it to my brother? If you vouch for him. But Sarah, you sure about this? From what you've told me, he hasn't exactly been supportive. I know, but he's still family. That evening, I sat Marcus down and made him an offer. I talked to Frank about your situation. He might have some work for you. Marcus looked up, hope flickering. What kind of work? Basic furniture restoration. Stripping old paint, sanding, prep work. It's not glamorous, but it pays $10 an hour. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. You'd help me get a job? After everything? It's not charity. You have to work for it. And Frank doesn't tolerate laziness or attitude. How long would it take to earn $15,000 at 10 an hour? I did quick math. If you worked 20 hours a week, about 3 years. But that's assuming you don't spend any of it, and you keep another job too. 3 years, he repeated, sounding defeated. Marcus, you got into this mess over months. It's going to take time to get out of it. His voice was small when he spoke again. Why would you help me? After I called you a burden? For the first time in years, he sounded like the brother I remembered from childhood, not the cruel bully he'd become. Because Grandpa would want his tools to help family. Even family that doesn't always get along. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. Okay, when can I start? Working with Marcus was tolerable, though not easy. He complained about the physical labor and got frustrated when Frank corrected his technique. But he seemed genuinely surprised to discover he was capable of detailed work. The pay was modest, and progress on his debt was slow. After 6 months, he'd barely made a dent in what he owed. He got discouraged and snapped at me when I tried to encourage him. This is pointless, he said after a particularly difficult day. At this rate, I'll be paying this off forever. You're learning a skill, and you're staying out of deeper trouble. Yeah, well, maybe I should just declare bankruptcy and start over. The old Marcus was still there, looking for easy ways out. But increasingly, I saw flashes of someone different, someone willing to put in effort, someone who took pride in finishing a difficult project. Our relationship remained complicated. We worked together without major conflicts, but we weren't friends. Too much history stood between us. After a year, Marcus had improved enough that Frank started giving him more responsibility. His pay went up to $12 an hour, which helped with the debt, but progress was still slow. I'm starting to see why Grandpa liked this work, he admitted one day, while sanding a chair leg. It's satisfying when you get it right. It was a small admission, but it felt significant. 2 years after finding Grandpa's letter, I was running a legitimate small business, though it was still struggling. I'd gotten better at restoration work, but Frank had been right. Building a reputation took time. I had regular clients now, but was barely making more than I had at the library. Marcus had become a reliable employee, though we'd formalized our arrangement with a contract Frank insisted on. Family businesses can get messy. Better to have everything in writing. The arrangement was working slowly. Marcus handled prep work and basic restoration, while I managed client relationships and detailed projects. We'd found a rhythm that played to our respective strengths. One evening, as we finished a refinishing project, Marcus said something that surprised me. I'm sorry, for the stuff I said before, about you being a burden. I looked up from the drawer I was sanding. What brought that on? I was thinking about this piece we just finished. It was basically junk when we started, but you saw potential in it. He paused. I guess I never could see potential like that. In furniture or in people. You're learning. Yeah, maybe. But I should have seen it in you years ago. It wasn't a complete apology, and it didn't erase years of hurt. But it was something. The important thing is we're here now, building something together. Marcus nodded, though he still looked troubled. I just wish it was going faster. The debt, that was still hanging over us. Despite steady work, Marcus had only paid off about 1/3 of what he owed. Interest and basic living expenses meant progress was painfully slow. These days, when people ask about my business, I tell them it started with a letter from my grandfather. What I don't mention is how hard it's been to make it work. 3 years in, the business is finally stable, though not thriving. I've built a small but steady client base, and my skills have improved to the point where Frank considers me competent, if not exceptional. It's honest work that pays the bills, but I'm not getting rich. Marcus has been debt-free for 6 months now, though it took nearly 3 years. We've continued working together, and while our relationship has improved, it's still complicated. Some wounds heal slowly, and trust takes time to rebuild. Our parents have acknowledged they didn't handle our family dynamics while growing up. We thought it was just normal sibling rivalry, Mom said recently. We didn't realize how much damage was being done. I've mostly forgiven them, though there are still awkward moments and unresolved tensions. Family therapy would probably help, but nobody's quite ready for that conversation. I keep GrandPa's original letter framed in the workshop, along with a photo of him in his storage unit workspace. Sometimes clients notice and ask about the story. I tell them my grandfather taught me that everyone has potential, even when they can't see it themselves. What I've learned is that being called a burden doesn't make you one. Sometimes people who try to make you feel small are struggling with their own problems. And sometimes, if you're lucky and patient, you can find a way to help each other instead of just hurting each other. Marcus still has difficult moments, and I still don't completely trust him with important decisions. But we've learned to work together, which is more than I thought possible years ago. I guess Grandpa was right about quiet strength. Sometimes it really can move mountains, or at least help rebuild relationships that seemed beyond repair. It just takes longer than the stories make it seem.